female leadership, etc., so that I can make an educated decision as a woman where I feel safe training. Because often we just go to the closest gym in our neighborhood and only discover, 3 months down the line when something bad happens that this is not a safe place to train in.
Yep.
And the problem with any situation where you have a play on power, so when there's a jiu-jitsu black belt, for example, or a world champion boxer, or whatever the case is, and he happens to be a male and has all the key.
Welcome everyone. You're through to the FightWeek Show, and I'm here, finally here with G.I. Jess. Jess, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
How's South Africa been treating you? How's life treating you?
Yeah, life is good. I'm living the dream at the moment. Making my professional debut and being able to fight in EFC has been such a big highlight of this year.
You fight out of Cape Town in South Africa. Do you mind telling our audience, what they might not know about you, and tell them about yourself and how you came into MMA?
So living in Cape Town, I co-own a MMA gym with my husband Mike. I kind of fell into the MMA space. Well, I've been around the MMA space for the last 15 years. Mike and his brother had PFA, the gym that we owned together, before I got involved. And so I've been around MMA and around fighting my entire life, but only really got into jiu-jitsu kind of in the last 7 to 10 years, and didn't take it all that seriously in the beginning. And then I would say only kind of in the last 4 or 5 years was I really, seriously competing. And I really thought that was where it kind of, ended for me, that I would just be a grappling girl. I accidentally fell into MMA by accepting a charity fight about 3.5 years ago. And that was the first time I threw a punch or ever did any sparring. Was this first amateur MMA fight that I accepted, which was to raise funds for a gender-based violence initiative. And while the bug just bit, so, the first fight, I knew that this was something that I needed more of. Any jiu-jitsu competition since then, well, I haven't competed in jiu-jitsu since then because it just wouldn't get me as excited. So what was really just a bucket list, once-off thing to raise money for charity has become a complete passion, and in turn, a bit of a career as well.
You're killing it in the EFC. How stacked is your division, and how far do you think you can go?
It's an interesting question, because initially going pro was really just because I felt like I ran out of girls to fight from an amateur perspective, because the division is quite small. So as a strawweight, there's already seems to be quite a few smaller ladies doing the sport. And then obviously just being in Africa and being a female, there's just less and less, options. So the decision to go pro was because we kind of run out of amateur competition. And the division isn't very stacked, not in EFC, which is crazy for me, because globally there's strawweights are plentiful, and they're quite stacked organizations. So pretty much the belt or the title is there for the taking. It's vacant at the moment. The previous champ, I think she's in Bellator at the moment. So it's there for the taking. I just need to keep fighting. EFC needs to keep finding me, girls to beat. But it's been a lot of fun so far. And initially the goal was just to do, to have a fight because I was excited to fight. And now the goal has shifted in the sense that I'm having a lot of fun and I'm enjoying it. So I'd like to keep fighting. And if that means fighting for a belt in the near future, then I'm keen for that.
You said in your post that you're coming into MMA when a lot of female fighters are even looking to retire. What's revitalized that energy, that passion, that commitment?
So I think, my age is a factor, being an older athlete. I mean, I'm 36 this year, and that is professional athlete terms, almost retirement age. But I think that I've had to reframe, or I'm starting to have to reframe that being a negative thing for me. I think, to be honest, a lot of my last fight, with my last opponent, Haiti, her being so young, I think she was 23, and on paper, she looked like she had all the advantage. But I really believe that my emotional maturity is one of the things that really set the fight apart for us. So I'm starting to look at my age as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. And because I've only been in the sport for the last 3 years, I don't have, what Mike says is mileage. I haven't been fighting for the last 15 years, and therefore, I've been knocked out a couple of times, et cetera, et cetera. None of that's happened. So in terms of physical mileage, I'm still a baby in the sport. So age is just a number at this point.
This is situations with female challenges in the gym, and coaches and stuff like that. Please, can you tell us, some of the challenges that you've been through or might have been through or know someone that's been through, and how bad is it and what can be done, moving forward to make it better for some of you guys, please.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because being a female in a male dominated space, and that is anywhere really in the fitness space. So whether that's a mixed martial arts space or a jiu-jitsu space, or whether it's a CrossFit gym, for example, which is really where you would have heard me been, quite vocal in the last couple of weeks, is there was an incident in a local CrossFit gym here where the coach was discovered to be filming women in the shower. And the story broke. This woman who was filmed was quite young. She was only like 19 years old. And there was a big cover up that kind of went on, and it broke in the media eventually. And not a lot of people were very vocal about it. And I felt quite compelled to become vocal about it, purely because I'm a gym owner myself, because I'm a female, and because South Africa is already just really at the top of the log where gender-based violence is concerned. The CrossFit space, very much like the MMA space, is male dominated, particularly male coaches, and a lot of women who are in that space having to kind of wade through the minefield that can be sexual harassment or a little bit of gender-based violence, and it's difficult to deal with. So I myself have been a victim of a level of sexual harassment in my gym, which is something that I spoke about in the video that you saw. And at the time, it wasn't really dealt with properly. So I did what I could to kind of speak to the leadership of the gym and explain what had happened. But the problem with a male dominated space where there's friendships between male coaches is that your stories can get spun and changed in such a way that it sometimes people don't believe you, or there's a level of victim blaming where suddenly you're now the one that asked for it or implicated yourself or whatever. And when this happened to me, it was before I was involved in the gym as a coach. And I made that decision that if I was going to be in this space, that I would want to do everything I could to create a female orientated gym for women to train. And that starts with small things like making sure that there are the right changing facilities and shower facilities where women feel safe and private to get dressed and undressed. It needs to be things like making sure that women are training in a space where they're not going to be a victim of any kind of sexual harassment, which means that if they are a victim of something, there's a channel they can follow so they can speak to somebody who's actually going to action it, not just sweep it under the rug. We've created things like female-only classes. Obviously, with female leadership in the gym, it helps as well. So from our gym perspective, these are small kind of pieces of the puzzle that I'm trying to put together to make it safer in the gym that I'm in. But more than that, I think the discussion that I'm having with the MMA Women's Commission in South Africa, which I'm on the board of, is to try and create some kind of female friendly rating system amongst gyms, so that as a woman, if you're wanting to sign up to a gym, you can go to a platform and have a look at, where are the most female centric or female safe gyms that tick 10 boxes, so to speak, in terms of they've got changing rooms, they've got ladies only classes, they've got female leadership, etc., so that I can make an educated decision as a woman where I feel safe training. Because often we just go to the closest gym in our neighborhood and only discover 3 months down the line when something bad happens that this is not a safe place to train in. And the problem with any situation where you have a play on power, so when there's a jiu-jitsu black belt, for example, or a world champion boxer, or whatever the case is, and he happens to be a male and has all the keys to your knowledge, there's this imbalance of power. And when there's an imbalance of power, it's very easy for a female student to get wrapped up in something that they're not actually consenting to be part of. But because of that imbalance of power, it's easy to get it wrapped up into that. So that's kind of where I'm passionate about being at this place at this point in time, is really just trying to create safer spaces for women to train in.
Also over here in the UK, we spoke to one of our female athletes not too long ago, Molly Lindsay. Shout out to Molly Lindsay. And over here in the UK, it's the same thing. They almost say to the women, "Oh, you want to be you said you wanted to be one of the lads. Well, this is how he is, like being one of the lads," and and then that gives them the right to maybe even touch it appropriately, or no privacy when they're getting changed. All this sort of stuff, and I think it's wrong, and it should be highlighted.
Absolutely. I think my thing with this is that it is a male dominated space, and if gyms don't want to have women training in their spaces, that's absolutely fine. I'm not saying it's ideal, but if you're like you only want to train men, and you don't believe that women have any place in the fight space, then don't allow them to train in your space. Don't take their money, but if you're wanting to cater to women, if you're happy to take their money for gym membership, then you need to make damn well sure that you're catering towards their needs. And that's the bottom line. If you want to teach kids and take the money from kids because it's a lucrative space, you need to make damn well sure that you're accommodating them with a safe trainer, with a child-friendly environment, etc. So that's the important part at the end of the day.
You said you own a gym with your husband. How difficult is it, managing and co-owning the gym together, but still fighting as well? So you're doing coaching and fighting.
Look, it's been a journey and we've added layers as we've gone along. So initially coming into the space, so I actually owned a marketing agency for 6 years, and that's what I did before this. And I was only coming to the gym kind of 2-3 times a week in the evening to train. I think that at that time I wasn't taking training and fitness as seriously, and he would get these amazing messages from clients going, Mike, since I've been training with you, I've come off my antidepressants, you've really changed my life. Lots of stories like that. On the flip side to that, as working in the marketing space that I was in, I was just getting a lot of corporate clients going, we're unhappy with this. Where's our return on investment on this? You need to make the next deadline. There was never really a lot of appreciation. So I didn't feel like the work I was doing was very deep. So I made the decision about 6 years ago to shift gears and close down my marketing agency and moved into the gym full time, and began kind of personal training, really working particularly more with women wanting to lose weight. I taught some yoga as well. And since then, my coaching role has grown as I've grown. So initially we had to kind of get used to just working together after not working together for so long. We had a previous business together before this, but we had a big break and had our own kind of domains. And then suddenly I moved into his and kind of said, well, this is half mine now, honey. So we had to kind of figure that out. So figure out what it was like for both of us to be in the same space.
That's right.
And after we figured that out, I think what grew from that is this female safe space. And now we have very, very clear different roles in the gym. He is very much involved with coaching of fighters. We've got a very big professional and amateur team. And I'm just one fighter in that team. Whereas I've got a coaching role from a jiu-jitsu perspective, from a yoga perspective, a personal training perspective, and then just a running the gym perspective. But so our roles are very different. And while we own the gym together, when it comes to me being a fighter and him being my coach, that is almost quite a removed relationship from everything else that we do. And we've spoken about that quite often, where he's like, look, when you're in the cage, I don't look at you as my wife, you're just a fighter. And that's very much how it is for me. When I'm being coached by him or when I'm part of the fight team, there's no room for me to wear a wife role in that moment, if you know, because it doesn't set a good example for the rest of the fighters, and it doesn't serve me in that moment because it stops me from learning. So I need to be able to take the criticism that I need to take in that moment. So we've been able to, over the last couple of years that we've been doing this, just learn to compartmentalize a lot of it. Having said that, obviously when you come home, there is this, especially if you've been smashed in training and you're feeling quite low, there can be an overlap where I'm coming home as his wife that's had a really bad day at the office. And we have to have a conversation going, I'm talking to you as my husband now, or I'm talking to you as my husband as your coach now. So we have to have those moments of differentiation, saying, I'm coming to you, but I need you to fulfill this role for me right now.
Being a mom in MMA, for me, because it's something that I find very, very fascinating. We've seen, people do it at the top level with people. So being a parent in this space, especially like you just said, with your son, also competing as well. How hard is it competing in front of them as to watching them compete?
It's interesting. We've actually spoken about this quite a lot, because I'll see, you see these fighters in the UFC level bringing their kids to their fights. Obviously, even at EFC level, you see every now and again someone's walking out with their kid.
Yeah,
it's not something that I've done yet. So my kids have not come to my fights. They watch it on TV, but they haven't been at any of my fights. They've come to a couple of weigh-ins, but I find it quite distracting. So even if I'm sparring in the gym and in my peripheral, one of my kids walks past, it's almost like as a woman, it shifts me into a different gear. For me, I feel like as a female, I almost am not a mother in that moment. So in that moment when I'm a fighter, I'm almost putting that little mom box, to the side. I've just noticed in myself that it's distracting, and so it's something that's not going to serve me in a fight. But for men, I think there's something quite empowering about, walking as like the alpha male into that cage with your clubs with you. When my kids have competed, so that's quite interesting. So my son's done a couple of jiu-jitsu competitions and a couple of boxing fights, and I don't really get that nervous when he competes. I think because I understand the sport, and you know how prepared your kid is or isn't, so you can have a level of understanding and confidence. My daughter, on the other hand, is getting quite into gymnastics and acrobatics.
Right.
And when she competes in that, probably because I don't understand the sport at all, I'm so nervous. So for me, it's way more watching her. But with both of particularly with this last fight, because there was so much kind of chaos and drama around it, and they watched the weigh-in, so they knew that there was this drama around the weigh-in. I knew they were watching live, and there was kind of the story that had been created around, a bully and teaching the bully a lesson and all of that. So my kids were running with that story about the bully that, pushed mom at the weigh-in. So walking out, there was a moment where I thought, oh shit, my kids are watching this. I can't be in front of my kids. There was some kind of strength that I found in knowing that they were watching.
The trajectory that you're going now in terms of going in, getting the job done, finishing fights, is that what you anticipate, going forward?
In terms of finishing fights, I've always been my fights have generally, when they've gone my way, they've been quick finishes. They've been round 1, round 2 finishes. I very rarely go the distance. And it's always been in the back of my mind of like, can I go the distance? Because if you never get tested with that, then you don't know if you can. But we train for that, obviously, from a cardio perspective, and you're doing multiple rounds when you're sparring. But yeah, I think because I don't have that traditional striking background where, if you've been doing Muay Thai your whole life, or if you've been doing boxing your whole life, you're used to going the distance because that's just how things go. Very, especially as a female, you're not necessarily going to be a knockout artist. So because I don't come from that background where I've had years and years of points fighting or just, slogging it out, I've always kind of looked for those finishes. And maybe it comes because of the grappling background. I love ground and pound as well. It's something that I love because I don't come from that striking on the feet background. When I discovered ground and pound, I was like, well, this is amazing. This makes sense. I can sit on you and I can hit you. I like my fights in my mind are always going to be look for the takedown, finish ground and pound, because that's what I enjoy doing. And if your ground and pound is good, or if, I'm obviously working on it every day, then those finishes are just the opportunity for those finishes are there. So I hope that'll continue to be exciting finishes.
What are you, looking to show your fans, people that really rock with you? Like what are you looking to prove to them?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I don't think that I necessarily have anything to prove. And again, I think that that's something that comes from maybe being a bit older and a bit more mature, is that I got into fighting for myself. It's actually something that I'm doing purely for my own joy and pleasure. Yeah. Just the longer I can do it for, the happier I'm going to be. So I think in a setup like we have, where our lives are quite busy, we've got a full-time business, we've got 2 kids, like life is full and busy. For me to be able to get through a fight camp, and make it to the fight is a very selfish 10 to 12 week camp where, you know, between my husband and my kids, everyone's rallying around mom's in fight camp, mom's going to fight. So they're allowing me this kind of selfish time for myself to see how far I can go with this dream. And I just want to really ride that as long as I can. If there is a legacy, so to speak, that I end up leaving behind, I was saying this to somebody else the other day, that, you know, if there's anything that people remember from this journey from my side, it's really just that I want people to see that it doesn't matter how old you are. You know, you're never too late and you're never too old to kind of pursue a dream.
It's incredible that you began fighting in 2019. When I look back to it, I still think how crazy that is. But the traction that you've gained in that space of time, it's been astronomical as well. How good does it feel to, you know, to have gained that sort of traction and be, well, you know, relatively be known by, you know, by a lot of folks in the MMA world about what you're doing, your style, and the way that you're finishing fights?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily that well known, but it's definitely.
Well, I think you're, well. We found you over here in the UK. That's not by accident.
I'll take it. Look, I think it's been an incredible journey. EFC has been great to me. They've got a you know, great reach. It's a great organization in terms of what they're doing for MMA in Africa. So I'm very blessed that I've been afforded that opportunity to be on a stage like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody knew who I was before that. So it's really a new thing, but it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I love the big lights. I like a big stage. You know, I've always been a bit of a performer in terms of previous, you know, careers that I've had. So I wasn't afraid. A lot of people, when they make their debut, you know, you talk about first time under the big lights. Interestingly, for me, it's always been the opposite. So my first 2 amateur fights were on quite a big stage. And then COVID happened and we had a couple of COVID fights where, you know, there was no audience, no cameras, no lights, so to speak. And those always kind of felt like, you know, glorified sparring sessions. They didn't feel like a show. I definitely didn't perform as well as I did when it was a bigger show. So there's something that I think you either have as a performer or as a fighter. You know, either have it or you don't. So either you like the audience and you like the big lights, or it's, you know, it's too much for you, and then you've got to work on that. So I'm lucky and blessed in that I've never shied away from a camera or from a big stage. So it's been a lot of fun.
EFC is gleaming with talent, which you're one of them as well. You know, we've got examples like Dricos, Cameron Simon, MSP that we've had on the show, Temba Gorimbo. You know, there's a lot of these guys from your organization that's moving on to do some great things. What do you boil the talent in South Africa and Africa as a whole?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. Obviously, with, you know, previously a lot of your African fighters weren't necessarily living and training out of African countries, but they were getting picked up by the UFC, but already in the States or, you know, on other continents. So even though they've got that African blood, you know, the actual training has been at somewhere else, somewhere that's more developed. So there you could argue that, you know, being a warrior is in your blood and in your culture, and I think it is. But what we were missing maybe is that elite training and then the opportunities to get noticed. So what we're seeing now is, previously, I think a lot of the gyms that were around when MMA first kind of came to South Africa came from like a traditional kickboxing background and hadn't quite merged, you know, all the tools from an MMA perspective together in a beautiful way just yet. And I think what we're seeing in the last couple of years is that the few gyms that are able to do that are really now producing some good talent. And we've seen the likes of guys getting to the UFC now, fighting internationally, both predominant. Well, I think what's exciting to see now is that guys like Dricus are able to train in South Africa, so keep their gym and their training still in their country. Previously, what a lot of guys did is that they would get picked up and then they would move overseas, or they would only get, you know, picked up once they moved overseas. So that's what's exciting to see, is that we're having these African or South African born, bred and trained fighters that are starting to come up. And somebody like Cameron Simon is quite exciting because he's a guy that doesn't come from any kind of previous background. You know, he only did MMA. So he's like the new breed of youngster that's growing up with MMA.
So young as well. Crazy.
Yeah. Somebody like Dricus obviously started with a kickboxing background, etc. So It's going to be interesting to see where we go in the next 5 to 7 years with MMA in Africa.
There's a lot of great women talent, and I have to, I mean, maybe not so stacked in the EFC, but when you look across promotions, like PFL, Bellator, Cage Warriors over here in the UK, you look at some of the women fighter that they got there, and I think is it's quite deep. There's a lot of good, fantastic women fighters out there. There's no doubt about it. And to you, who was the female fighter that say you look up to, or that's a goat to you?
Initially, I think a lot of women were getting into the UFC a little bit before their time because they were just so excited to start filling up that division. So I think we saw a lot of good talent, but when the new kind of generation of talent came in, we would, see a dominant champion like a Ronda Rousey, for example, suddenly get exposed. And a lot of your initial fighters that were inducted into the UFC couldn't hang with the new age, the new age woman, so to speak. But there is a lot of very exciting multi-dimensional talent. I get excited about both the strawweight and the flyweight division in the UFC. If you're going to ask me kind of who's my favorite female fighter, it's going to be Valentina Shevchenko, hands down every time. She's just a complete assassin. I mean, here's a woman she's been at it since she was like 5 years old, and she's impeccable. Her technique cannot be faulted. I mean, she makes everything just look beautiful. So I think I don't relate to her because I don't think my fighting style is anything close to hers. But definitely, 100%. If I could come back in another life and start fighting at 5 years old, that's what I would aspire to be like.
Who would be your ideal matchup and why? Like in the strawweight or the flyweight? If
in what organization now?
Well, in the UFC. Say like what would be your ideal matchup? In terms of their style.
Wow, that's an interesting question. That's not something that I've ever actually thought about. Making me dream big here.
Let's dream for a minute.
Right. Let's dream for a minute. Ideal matchup. Weirdly enough, the first name that comes to mind is Cheyenne Flismus. And I think that's because she's got South African roots. So that's probably why she's coming to mind. But she's quite a brawler. She doesn't have, I wouldn't call her, that she's got necessarily impeccable striking or impeccable grappling. She definitely comes more from a striking background, but she's like an all-round full of attitude, kind of dirty brawler, gritty type of fighter, which is
pressure fighter as well.
Which is how I would kind of consider myself. So I think that would make for a very interesting matchup.
Look, you're a businesswoman, and we know about some of your businesses that you've posted on your pages. It'd be a miss, if we didn't, get to talk about that. Please tell us about your businesses and your products, and where people can find them and come and support it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, look, obviously my main business is my gym with my husband, and that's Pride Fighting Academy. That's in Cape Town, so you have to be in Cape Town to enjoy that. But since 2020, since our kind of COVID lockdown, I went online with my training and my health coach solutions. So that can be found at gijess.online. And basically you can train with me online, whether that's a program for strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu or for MMA, or whether you're just wanting to kind of lose weight and get into shape. And then I'm very big on nutrition coaching as well, on primal nutrition coaching. So I work with various clients online and just to help them regain and optimize their health through the right kind of diet.
Yeah, man. Fantastic. So people, you've heard it. Go to our page, go on our website, and go and support the movement. Is there anyone else you'd like to thank? Sponsors, your coaches, people that are good to you?
I'm very blessed. I've got amazing coaches. My husband Mike being obviously as a forerunner of that, and I'm always thanking him because without him, none of this would be possible at all. He's literally molded a mommy into a fighter in as little as 3 years' time.
He's done a good job.
He's a magic maker. And then in terms of sponsors, Yeah, I've been very blessed this year that I've really partnered with some amazing sponsors. They're all South African based businesses, but I work with an electrolyte company called Revive. They're at the kind of the top of my list of supplements that I'm taking on a daily basis. And then I've got a really great boot and bag sponsor called Magnum Boots. There are these like very brand appropriate, GI Jess has to wear, combat boots. So I've got a boot sponsor. They've been really, really good and kind to me as well. LA Farms is a regenerative meat sponsor. And then Ligam is a new South African fightwear brand that does, gloves and a couple of fight gear items, and they've been really good to me as well. So yeah, I've been very blessed that I've got some amazing sponsors, and a lot of guys often will not realize that fighters, even at the top level, our purses aren't always huge, and really what pays the bills along the way, that pays for all that training and all that rehab is very much reliant on the sponsors that back us. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much for staying with us, for watching this, for showing this some support. You've heard everything what Jess has had to say. Go and check on our page. Go follow our page. Until the next video, hasta la vista, people. Salute.